I call this meeting of the Perry Township Records Commission to order by roll call.
Mr. Cheney?
Yes.
Mr. English?
Yes.
Mr. Repper?
Yes. And for us, two sets of minutes, one for January 17th, 2018. For a motion to approve those minutes. I'll make that motion. Second, vote. Yes. And minutes for February 23rd, 2022. For a motion to approve those minutes. Make that motion. Second. Yes, vote. Yes. And the commission's been provided with the changes to the Perry Township records retention schedule for submission to the Ohio History Connection Working Records Program titled RC2. Assuming that everyone has read that, for a motion to approve those records retention schedule as submitted. I'll make that motion. Second. Vote. Yes. Yes. And is there anything else to come for the commission?
No.
Before motion to adjourn. I'll make that motion. Second. Vote. Yes. 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 Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's start. Rebecca, if you hold on just 1 second, I know we have some presentations to give. So, Chief, go ahead. You want us out of the way?
No.
Okay.
Chris? Funny. For any of those you don't know, that's often Chris. As you all know, I took this job, I said I would make mistakes, and here's the first one. Officer Brew is the Officer of the Year for 2021. He was nominated by his peers. The awards committee reviewed and agreed. Unfortunately, he knew he was Officer of the Year. He got to ride a horse type parade, but he never received his plaque, and it was never brought up because his chief forgot. So, with that said, I want to present Officer Rue with his Officer of the Year plaque for 2021. But I want to read one thing about who Officer Rue is. Officer Rue's direct supervisor has stated that Officer Rue completes every task that is given to him without complaint or question. Officer Rue is an asset to second shift in this department. He personifies selfless service and sets an example to which all of us should strive. Just one of the many things that was said about Officer Rue and his nominations, and he received several in 2021. So it's my honor and pleasure to present to you the 2021 Officer of the Year. Thank you, Officer Rue. Speech.
That ain't happening.
All right, thank you.
Edward? Don't look nervous. This is a good thing. You all know Officer Edward Conlon III. Edward came to us. How many years you been here now?
Not even two.
Not even 2 years. And Edward is our 2022 officer. One of the things I'd like to read, same thing. He has observed significant improvements in Officer Conlon's investigations and enforcement actions just in the past year. Officer Conlon showed bravery and compassion when interacting with a suicidal person with a firearm. Officer Conlon assisted Sergeant Miller in getting that person in custody without any use of force and helped them to safety. One of the many reasons that Officer Conlon is our 2022 Officer of the Year. I present to you 2022 Officer of the Year. Thank you for your service. I still think you need a DNA test with your father, but we'll talk about it.
There we go.
Ready?
Yes.
So just to set the stage, Rebecca Princehorn comes to us from Bricker and Eckler. And she's going to speak tonight a little bit about House Bill 140 and the impact that it has upon elections and levies and all that wonderful stuff that townships will be going through, what we have to do as far as education and awareness to our residents as this impacts what they will be seeing out there in regards to those types of measures. And I know you were so gracious as to do this before the Franklin County Township Association, but I think we can go a little bit more in depth. This November, we have a road levy that will be on the ballot. So this is near and dear to our heart to understand what our residents will be seeing and hearing about this measure and perhaps how we need to address our strategy of educating and making our residents aware of really what that measure is and what it does and doesn't do. So I'll leave it to you to explain how that House Bill 140 impacts our normal course of business.
Okay. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Earlier, I had provided Beth with actually two things. One is a House Bill 140 handout. The other is a little bit about campaign guidance that I'll address at the end. As far as House Bill 140 is concerned, this legislation was kicking around for about a half dozen years and finally passed and was effective in September, first applicable to the May 2023 election. And if you look on page 2, we list some of the high points about the legislation, but where I think it really drives home is on page 3, where we compare what the ballot language looked like under old law versus what the ballot language is going to look like under House Bill 140. And the first thing right off the bat that you note, the taxpayers are going to see, even before they see the amount of millage, they are going to see the dollar amount that is to be collected annually during the course of the levy. And so that kind of just hits you in your face that that's the first thing folks will see. And then it follows that you get into really two different ways to look at the proposed levy. One is in mills for each dollar of taxable value. The other is in dollars for each $100,000 of the county auditor's appraised value. Taxable value and appraised value are two different things, and we believe have a lot of possibility of confusing voters. If you turn to the next page, we also do a compare and contrast of what the ballot form looks like for renewal. And the beginning is the same, but again, you've got that dollar amount to be collected in the first year as the first thing the voter sees. Then you have the mills per $1 of taxable value, which amounts to X number of dollars for each $100,000 of the county auditor's appraised value. And this does not acknowledge that there are different kinds of property. Now in Perry Township, my hunch is you guys are largely residential, but that is not true statewide. You have in other places in Ohio, you have timber property, you have agricultural property, a variety of other kinds of property that has a different assessment rate. For example, public utility personal property is assessed at 88% of value, not 35% like residential. So if you turn over to page 5, you will see that, again, every voter is assumed to be a homeowner. And the effective rate for that renewal will definitely differ from the full voted rate that people are going to see on the ballot. And as I mentioned, you've got different reduction factor calculations done for different classes of property, and public utility property not only is assessed at a 88% rate, there's no reduction factor applied to that type of property. Going on, the other thing that we think is going to be potentially confusing to voters is a difference between how taxes are levied and how taxes are actually paid. Those are two very different things. And you could very well have a homeowner, and right now I'm over on page 6. You could have a homeowner that is getting the rollbacks. And remember, rollbacks are who's paying. If you have a tax levy that was in place by September 29th, 2013, that homeowner is only paying 87.5% of the tax bill. The state is paying the remainder because of rollbacks that were in place for residential agricultural property and for owner occupied. Perry Township is still getting 100% of the tax. It's just who's paying it. That is very different from homestead, which has had, it's like a cat with 9 lives. It's gone so many different ways, but now it is back to being a wealth ranked kind of program. And homestead exempts the first $25,000 of value of an owner occupied home. So it's not who's paying, it's what's taxed. Again, the township gets 100%. The state picks up that difference. The other thing, which may not be as much of an issue for you in Perry Township, but is an issue in other places in Ohio, only about 30% of Ohioans live in a home that has a value as high as $100,000. And again, that may not be as applicable to a suburban community like Perry Township, but in other parts of the state, people are going to look at their ballot form and think, well, my house isn't valued at $100,000. So how does this relate to me? Which takes us over to the end. The thing that is going to be, I believe, very challenging for all townships going forward is to help voters understand what your needs are on a continuing basis, not just at levy time. And again, I think when voters are seeing the amount estimated to be received before anything else, not that Perry Township has any critics, I'm sure you do not, but if you do, there are going to be folks who are just going to think perhaps the township doesn't need that much revenue. Again, there's a big difference between how property taxes are levied versus how they're paid, and how these different programs come into play. As far as paperwork, it's been a bit of a comedy, because even though the statute was, or you should say the legislation was effective at the end of September, we never saw the county auditors, and the rest of us that work in this area never saw the county auditor calculation forms until the day before Thanksgiving. And they are now, Department of Taxation is on the third set of revisions to these forms. And so I tell you this because it's a whole new ballgame. All the resolutions have changed, the ballot form has changed, the auditor's form has changed. So something to remember is you cannot simply mark up what you did before, because none of it will work under all these different changes. So the final point I would make, which is the segue to my other remarks, is the auditor of state guidance that was due. Well, it's been promised for a year, and it was supposed to be available at the end of January, and we still haven't seen anything yet. I think it's going to make things a lot more challenging for the township to explain to voters in a way that doesn't run afoul of that guidance. So what I sent you is something we used actually end of January with some architects and some financial folks, but the issues are the same for all of you. And I'll go through this pretty quickly. If you look over on page 2, the slides, I apologize if they're so teeny. For the first time in Ohio history, we had a school board and superintendent criminally charged with misuse of public funds to support a levy. And the law has been out there for a very long time. 9.03 is there for you. And suffice it to say, the law says, while the township can provide information, what it cannot do is use any township resources to influence the outcome of a money question. And that would be a levy or a voted bond issue. And I'm at the top of page 3. Influence the outcome. So what does that mean for you? If you go over to page 5 at the bottom, the 3 words to remember are verifiable, factual, and neutral. And as you are communicating about the road levy, you can be verifiable, you can be factual and neutral, but you cannot say anything that would be designed to influence. If you turn the page, at the top, you can't say vote yes. You can't say support our township. You can't editorialize, no scare tactics. The auditor has said you can't even say remember to vote unless you say that at every election. You cannot put that on your website or any township materials if you're only doing it when the township has a question on the ballot. You're going to have a high functioning levy committee. And no scary tactics. If any services are going to be cut, you need to have those be approved by the Board of Township Trustees in advance of indicating that. And there's no de minimis amount. You spend 10 cents impermissibly, it's the same as if you spent $10,000. Over on page 7, there's a lot of information about public entity resources in terms of use of facilities. You cannot store, campaign, any signs, anything on township property. You can't have signs on township property to support a road levy. Nothing of the type. The auditor would say that all township officials work 24/7, and so you can't engage in political speech. We think there's a First Amendment problem with that, but that is the position that they are taking, that you really don't have your own time. And if you look over at page 8, even though, like I said, we disagree, you still need to be very careful in any pro-levy communication during business hours, when you are introduced as the township fiscal officer or the township administrator or township trustee. You really need to let the levy committee function in a high level way and do all the heavy lifting, all the promotional, persuasive kind of activity. These restrictions also apply to anybody, any contractor you might hire, architect, etc. The auditor is very much scrutinizing any surveys. I don't know that for a road levy you would be doing a survey, but a lot of public entities do surveys. And the auditor is looking at those with great scrutiny. The final thing I would tell you in this regard, and I can't make this up, is in the most recent draft that I saw of the campaign guidance, none of the township officials, trustees, fiscal officer, administrator, can say thank you in a public meeting on township time upon successful passage of the levy. That is viewed as misuse of public resources. Might take 3 seconds worth of resources, but you cannot say thank you publicly. The committee can say thank you, but you can't. Well, stunned silence.
I don't think we're allowed to say anything.
Well, that's kind of true, but I presented to another group of township folks, and they were looking at a fire levy and whether or not the firefighters on their own time could engage in dropping literature or be on a committee. On their own time, they can, but right now, as a public official, I would be very careful, because the auditor has publicly said in another setting that he doesn't view you as having your own time. You're 24/7.
But employees of the township in their own time.
Yeah.
On their own time.
I got a quick question. I mean, obviously, this looks like it lends itself in being factual. Could you say things like, here's what the road levy funds are used for? You know, snowplow, fixing this, fixing that, you know, and list the 10 things essentially they're used for. And you say then, if the levy passes, we will continue those. If the levy doesn't pass, we will have to take out snow plowing. I'm just using that as an example. If that's the case, the trustees would have to vote on that if the levy doesn't pass, that would be cut. And if that is voted on, then you can tell folks the consequences of that.
Yep.
Because that's sort of set in stone that will happen.
Yep.
Okay, so connected to that, if we do that hypothetically, and the levy does not pass, and we find some other means to be able to continue offering that service.
Yeah, I think, yes, I think you can do that. It's not freezing you in place, but I think they they don't want scare tactics that have no basis. They
No.
view the trustees passing a cut list, if you will, as providing a basis for being able to say, we can do these streets, but we can't do those. And then if the levy doesn't pass and you decide you find resources that you can do those, you're fine. It doesn't wed you to that, but they don't want you, as part of trying to get a levy passed, they don't want you just say, we're going to make these cuts without officially approving that.
So Rebecca, 2 points. So what you're saying is that none of us at this table can go to a civic association or HOA meeting and say anything about this levy? Or
No.
we can say things factual.
Factual, verifiable,
Viable,
and neutral.
neutral. So
And
we
I'm
actually
sure-
have our talking points.
Yes, and I'm sure, I've worked off and on with the township for a number of years. And you guys have always been very organized and have your plans well in hand. And I would be referring to your road improvement plan and, your list of projects you did with the levy previous and that type of thing, so that you can relate it to something verifiable.
Can we can't store we do yard signs. We can't store those yard signs here at the township.
No township property,
But we can store them at our own homes, even though we are 24/7.
We think you have a First Amendment right. And we think you can have a sign in your yard. You might not want to be the one to put it there.
Certainly we could keep.
Keep in mind the balloon that goes over.
Only if you report that.
So so Rebecca, we'll find a place to store the signs,
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah.
That's the least of our concerns. Okay.
But I think basically the key to all this is kind of what you said at the beginning, is preparation. Coming up with a script that meets all the requirements of this new of House Bill 140. And then you're just sticking to that script throughout the time period where you're asking for this to be approved. Whether a trustee is going to a civic association or putting something in our newsletter, it's basically gonna be the same script every time.
Yeah, and it's kind of boring and sterile, but your campaign committee can be persuasive.
And that would have to be no employees.
What about the civilian advisory board?
Yeah,
There you go.
that was one of my questions, Rebecca, is we do have a civilian advisory board. They're volunteering their time, they're not getting paid. Is that something they can pick up and take? Shoulder, okay.
But they
Yes,
can't.
but if they're gonna be receiving, donations to pay for the signs, obviously the township can't pay for the signs.
Right,
They're gonna have to form a political action committee and do, the paperwork to do that. It's not that hard, but that's what this is gonna mean.
okay, so I have one more question. So our citizen advisory board, we just got it started, back in August or September. And they have been allowed to use our space at the township hall. Because they use it for other things, can they use it for this? Or do they
Yes.
have? Okay,
But they have to follow whatever policies you have with respect to use of township facilities.
that's fine. We have a policy in place.
Okay.
And if an anti-levy group wants to use your facilities, you have to permit them on the same basis.
Okay.
So,
Wait.
so Rebecca, is there, so if we were to come up with, a mock-up of, not us, I'm sorry. The Civilian Advisory Board, come up with a mock-up of the yard sign and, a talking point kind of note card. And maybe a leaflet, a handout. Could you take a look at that to make sure from perspective of where you're coming from? Can you tell us whether or not it looks like we're, going into that, turbulent water here, or do I need an engagement letter with you, first of all, I guess?
Well, you might. You'll probably want us to do your election proceedings when you get to that point because everything is just so wacky. But in addition, we could also eyeball, what we would want to eyeball are things that the township is putting out.
Okay.
Putting on your website, any newsletter that you do. You can still do those things and still talk about the levy. You're the ones that the outer state has his eye on. The campaign committee, they can be persuasive and promotional all day long. It's what you're putting out that you would want us to fly spec.
But I can't have off-duty officers and off-duty road employees go door to door.
Oh, you
can't-
could on their own time, and it has to be
But I-
organized.
But Mr. Roper can't do it because he's on the 24/7.
That's right. The campaign committee can ask for volunteers.
I'm not either.
And if your employees want to volunteer, the campaign committee has to organize that. You cannot, but your employees certainly do have a concept of their own time that you don't.
Do you need a paper bag?
But that's just not who we are. I mean, that's just not, this board knows its residents. I mean, that's what we're known for, is to know who our residents are. I mean, that,
To talk to them and to be trusted.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah. It is what it is.
You should talk to your legislators. I mean,
oh, I do.
this is for real.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions?
I'm sure we'll have more questions.
Okay.
I mean, as we start to internalize that.
I have a question. When it comes to employees, as long as they're off the clock, there's no issue.
Correct. But the trustees cannot be organizing the door to door. It's got to be the campaign committee.
Got it.
Okay. Can you have that letter of engagement sent to Beth?
Yeah, I will.
Thank you very much for.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Bye.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Want to go to a brief recess?
You need 5. All right.
You have tissues?
Oh, my goodness.
So, okay. I'm sorry, Deputy. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm great.
Good.
Some
I'm glad.
level of disappointment. I don't really have anything.
Okay.
There's our accident investigation, it's not in your township this close, it's on 315, we have pedestrian struck, so our accident, I think one of your officers, he might have been out there to assist. but-
Yeah, we had a couple both
Yeah,
days.
so we had a pedestrian struck, he's fine, lower body injury, to use a hockey term. So I tried to get it.
All right, good.
That's what she got. Big news from this.
Okay.
That's it, yeah,
Deal.
that's it. Yeah, I can see that level of disappointment for you. Thank you again, also, myself and Debbie Upton were appreciative of the invite to the Township Association.
We were happy to have you.
Coming.
Okay, back to business. We have a set of minutes before us for regular session, January 18th. I look for a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Second vote?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Good, all check.
On your item, do we have people waiting?
Oh,
You just left.
he just stepped out, but he'll be right back.
Okay, okay, yeah.
He's gonna do the presentation.
Oh, okay. Public comment period?
For Brookside, we actually have our next meeting tomorrow night, where we'll be setting budget and dates and plans for the year. We will not be using the township hall tomorrow night.
Worthington Hills, I know they, March 4th is their community breakfast. We're all invited, so if you haven't registered, you want to let me know. I'll make sure that you get registered for that. It's at it's 10 a.m. to 12 noon at the Worthington Hills Country Club. And as Michelle had indicated, Wednesday night for Worthington Hills, they're setting the dates and budgets and throughout for the entire year. So more of that information will come at our next trustee meeting. Epcot and Ravello, anything? So, okay. Zoning, got a book.
Yeah, we got a book, Joe and I have gone through the zoning, we're at a point where, I think what I'll do is, I'll go ahead and just share this with everybody. So it's kind of laced with chloroform, so you can, get us ready, you know, sleep. But I'll get this, Beth, I'll coordinate with Jen to figure out all this, but I'll copy you on it.
Yeah, she's aware that it's gonna be coming.
Okay, yep. But it's gonna be a lot thinner. That'll be the good news. It'll be a lot thinner when it's all said and done.
Can you and Joe do something with me? Make me thinner. Throwing it out.
There's a lot of redlining involved. So. That's it. Where's that? Do you have anything, Kev?
I don't, the only thing I have is,
Everybody treat you
Rumor
well?
has it you're a landscape architect.
I majored in landscape architecture.
Oh, boy.
From where at? Would you go to high state?
I studied
What year?
75 through 78, and then again in 84.
So you had Jot.
I had Judd,
Yeah,
everybody had Judd.
yeah, I had Jot too.
I made Judd retire, no, I'm kidding.
You know I'm in LA too, right?
Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew that.
Like
yeah.
high state. Cool.
I never practiced.
Power. Anyway. I heard that, I wonder if it's permit. Anyway, cool. There's two cool people in the room.
And the English LA Day, but
Oh, people don't realize that Eddie George majored in landscape architecture. Hey, Eddie George, famous Ohio State football
Yeah.
player, he's also a landscape architect.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did.
Heisman Trophy running back is also a landscape architect.
My dog was a puppy in his TV show. Yeah, if you really want to go to those connections.
Okay, bring
My
it
dog
on.
has cool friends.
So I did want to mention our apartment complex, Arlington Point is getting sold and we're gonna have a new owner of Arlington.
Really?
Wow.
Because they asked for a letter for zoning compliance.
Uh,
So at
you
some
know-
point, we're gonna have a new owner of.
You know the name of the,
No.
we'll have to, when you become aware of that, we'll have to make sure that we get in touch with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're allowed. Yeah, we're allowed.
To be back behind the dumpster.
Yeah.
Okay. Road department.
I don't have anything on the agenda. The only thing, I'm meeting this week with the county at Epcot to walk through the Ravello streets and part of phase 2 to mark up areas of the road base, the concrete base that's gonna need to be replaced before, the streets are paved up there. That's all I have.
You wanna buy anything?
Not yet. I'm working on putting that together.
Fire and EMS report.
I have a report for Arlington from the month of January. There were 9 calls for service in Perry Township. One of those was at
Whole business, we'll talk about drone.
drone. Actually, we'll turn that over to Officer Carl Roberts. I'm sorry, Detective Carl Roberts.
Thank you, boss. Way in. Apologies, I didn't print them all one right after the other, trying to save. Put that in PowerPoint mode, or is it?
The slideshow.
Yeah.
Here, I have it, sorry.
There we go. All right, good evening, everybody. As the chief mentioned, my name is Carl Roberts. Gonna talk a little bit about drone stuff tonight and give you a little bit of information. I always hated when people read me slides, so I'm gonna do my best not to read any to you. And I've only got 8 slides, so I'll try and be kind of quick. One of the things that drones are really beneficial for, I mean, right now there's over 4 million registered drones in the country. About 48 states actually use them for different things and stuff. That left column is essentially a lot of what is what drone, or UAS, manned aerial systems, are being utilized for, and how we would try and actually employ it as well. So search and rescue, crash reconstruction, surveillance, tactical overwatch, there's a whole bunch of different things that we can actually use this platform to be able to do. What's really nice about it is that for a relatively inexpensive investment, it actually is a lot safer for officers. Chula Vista Police Department actually was part of a pilot program back in 2019 where they actually dispatched drones before they dispatched patrol officers, so that they could actually get to the scene and determine whether or not patrol officers even needed to go to that call. So saved a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of manpower. And what they found was that for the scenes that they did want officers to go to, they were usually a little bit more emergent, you know, a gunfight, a big traffic crash or whatever, and having those responding officers have that visibility of that scene ahead of time, not only enhance their safety, but it actually helped them tactically by allowing them to kind of formulate a plan and how they were going to do things before they got there. So it's not like just jumping out of your car and suddenly being hit with a whole myriad of decision matrices. They actually were formulating plans based on what they were looking at. One of the other nice things about it, these are man portable. So, you know, you can't really get a good picture of what it looks like with the PowerPoint, but this is the one that we're currently using. I'm gonna borrow your picture with each little one. And they're pretty small, they're pretty lightweight, pretty resilient. That's what they look like. Nothing too big and exciting. But what's nice about this, or one of the main reasons I like these kind, is because they can fly inside. So it's an indoor-outdoor tool. So based on whatever the scenario might be where we need to fly indoors and outdoors, that does give us that capability. The new one that we're looking at actually has infrared in addition to the regular standard cameras. And it actually gives us eyes in the dark and thermal imaging. So very, very helpful stuff. There we go. So just so you can kind of see what we've done so far, and I just actually got this one back in June, I think. So about 35, 36 hours that we've accumulated in the last 6 months. Obviously, the weather is one of the major concerns. These are not weather resistant, unfortunately. Those ones are much more money, 70, 80 grand. So if you guys want to spring for one of those, I totally would love that. But I figured we'd start small and kind of work our way up. So one of the things that we do have to do, at least at this point in time, is you have to have one of those Part 107 licenses. Obviously, that's mine, so we're covered with that. But one of the big things I'm really trying to push for is that certificate of authority. So the COA, which is done by the township attorney, sent over to the prosecutor for blessing, basically says, yep, we're a legitimate township or municipality. And as a result, we should be qualified to be able to do this. What's really nice about that is that now nobody else has to ever go and sit for this really boring 3 or 4 hour test, because we can self-certify. We have at least one guy who's got a Part 107. And if we have a COA, I can say, hey, Mike and I have been flying for, the past 3 weeks, practicing doing things, talking about airspace regulations, FAA, NTSB, and all of the other things that factor into that. And I can go, he's ready to fly. And he will be able to actually fly the drone with or without me. So kind of a nice feature from that standpoint. So this is what we have as far as what we currently have and what we really want. So the Mavic Air 2 is a pretty decent little air platform. It does a really good job for what we need. We'll still have it, so it'll be a backup and or a practice tool. They all fly very similar. That one only has a single camera. So if I want to zoom in, I have to fly closer to the object or to the scenario. The other one actually has a telescopic camera, has a thermal camera, and has a wide angle camera, so it actually does a lot more. Also gives me about 15 minutes more flight time, about 4 more hours of perch time. And that's basically where I would land it on top of a light post or a building and just watch what's going on. So instead of just flying and orbiting and making noise or any of that kind of stuff, I can land it on a rooftop somewhere and basically be able to see what's going on. It is cellular based, but it's a 5G cellular, but it also uses 4G and 3G if there's any still around. It does have a real-time kinematics. That's that little weird sort of bubble thing on top of it to the right. That's an attachment. And that's one of the things that we want to get. That RTK module actually allows us to do 3D mapping. You have some pictures of it, but I'll get there too in a minute. It also has a speaker attachment. The handset, unlike the one we're currently using, which is functional with an iPhone, this one actually has a much different controller with a built-in microphone. So we can actually use that loudspeaker and talk to people through the drone as well. So if we need to make announcements about evacuations, right, like they're doing in East Palestine right now, instead of knocking door to door, we can put the drone up, fly it around, and basically make those announcements the same way. Also talk to people who are, the lost child or the wandered elderly. We can actually voice contact them and tell them where to go and what to do. Also works for, obviously, our guys on the ground too. Much greater limit, about 2.5 times with 5 kilometers. It does have that enterprise controller. I'll show you what that looks like at Flight Hub as well. So up in the top left, that's the new controller. And you can kind of see that it's actually doing simultaneous split screen, thermal camera on the left, regular camera on the right. Directly below that in the lower left corner, that shows you basically where all the cameras are. That weird looking spout thing on the right lower corner is the actual speaker itself. And then Flight Hub, which is kind of cool because right now, if I want to actually show you what I see when I'm flying, I do a screensaver app that costs about $40-50 a year, right? This actually comes as part of that software package with this, so I can actually share this and everybody can have all the information that I have real time to, on a tablet, on a desktop, in a patrol car, wherever. Everybody can get a good idea of what's going on. So much greater capabilities with this tool. This is what some of the 3D mapping looks like. It actually is very, very cool because it does allow us to take measurements almost instantaneously. The drone will launch, it'll fly a pre-designated route, like a grid pattern, and will overlay, like you see in the upper right-hand corner, that grid, and actually create measurements based on that. It's pretty crazy Vulcan arithmetic, so don't ask me how it actually happens, but it does work pretty well. Go ahead.
How accurate, like the measurements down
To
to?
centimeters.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
with an RTK module like this, they actually call it sub-centimeter, but figure we'll give a little bit of here or there to little margin of error. That lower right-hand corner is actually the 3D model that it's sort of created, and those are manipulatable now. So if I say, all right, let's see if we kind of moved them back and put them together again, if they still ended up in the same configuration, it kind of helps us with reconstruction. You can see on the lower left-hand corner, what that UAS mapping looks like, how they basically do all the measurements and overlay it on a two-dimensional screen to give you that third dimension. And then the upper left-hand corner is basically some of the measurement stuff that it's able to do on the fly. And that's a huge thing for us because secondary accidents increase about 3% every minute that we're on scene, whether it's looky-loos or somebody not paying attention. Every minute puts us at additional risk, as well as fire personnel and other drivers or whatever the case may be. So being able to actually fly this thing and be done with a really significant traffic accident, about 20 to 30 minutes, where it would normally take hours and hours, and potentially even shutting down major thoroughfares, this can actually do all of that stuff so much quicker. So some current laws and stuff, and of course, everybody's got a little piece of the pie. FAA does, the NTSB, as I mentioned. TSA even has a couple of regulations that sort of touch drones. The FCC, because these are wired, radio wired and cellular wired, not wired, but you know what I'm saying. But right now, current law actually does show that you can use drones to fly. I know our policy basically says we should give everybody the expectation of privacy, but interestingly enough, there was a case law that was created out of Michigan, so it's Michigan predominantly, but it was interesting to me because it was a township who used a drone to fly over a growing junkyard that was in somebody's private residence back, fenced-in yard. So they used the drone, flew it over. This guy said, "Hey, that's a violation of my Fourth Amendment rights." Initially, they said, "No, it's not. Pay the fine." So he took it to the Michigan Supreme Court and they said, "Well, you know, it's interesting because there have been two or three other cases involving flyovers. Now, they were fixed wing aircraft or helicopters from police departments, but they said they were traveling in what would normally be a thoroughfare air traffic. So if I'm a private pilot and I'm flying my Cessna, I could see the same thing that the cop's seeing, which means it's public view, so it's not a big deal." The lady who actually decided this, the judge, said she actually cited other cases and all of them kind of tie back together. And this is a really long and involved story, but the bottom line is there is no law for Ohio. Right now, we have one law that is currently established as a result of anything to do with drones. And that's that says, hey, we have to have an aerospace and aviation technical committee. That's it. It's the only law we have on the books in Ohio. Everything else is kind of waiting for somebody, whether it's the Supreme Court or our legislation, to make a rule so that we actually have to do stuff. There are two House bills in effect right now, 45, 46. I'll let you read what they say, but that's basically, and those are projected to pass someday, eventually, maybe, who knows? They've been stalled for about the last year and a half, mostly because of COVID and some other things, but for the most part, that will actually help us quite a bit by establishing some left and right limits in what we can use our drone for. So the big things that I really need, obviously the COA completion is huge. The chief's working on that to procure the UAS, and then the Terra decision. I didn't really touch on this, but Terra, that mapping software, isn't free. I mean, it is for the first couple of months. They give us a trial period, but eventually they want us to actually buy the software package. Normally it retails for about $5,000 for a lifetime purchase. If we buy it now, it's $4,000. You can do it annually for $1,500, and right now they're going to give us a deal and we'll get it for $1,400. So eventually, if we want to keep using this the way we want to use this, which is with that 3D mapping for crime scenes or, traffic reconstruction, those kind of things. Yeah, and we can use them for zoning, we can use them for roads, we can measure this and measure that stuff as they're building it, and get really great results. But that's one of those sort of things we got to kind of look at too, is that in addition to the normal drone package, which fortunately does come with a 2-year warranty or replacement, so that if we crash it, Mike crashes it, I don't crash it. But if Mike crashes it, for like $100, they'll replace the whole thing. And then the next one is like $250, and then after that, it's like $500. So if you crash 3 of them, you're gonna end up spending some money to replace them. But that's part of their warranty. Normal drone with, average wear and tear lasts anywhere between 600 and 800 hours. So I did 35, 36-ish in the last 6 months. That's probably not an uncommon thing. Again, this is not weather resistant stuff, so I anticipate that, in Ohio weather's sort of crazy, but if we were in Southern California, we could fly this pretty much, with the exception of the 5 days of year that they have bad weather, which you don't want to fly anyway. But here, between October, November, all the way potentially to February or March, there probably wouldn't be as many opportunities to fly. So then the last thing we need to do, and this is more of an internal thing for us, is update our policy on how we want to use it, how it's going to work. And the good part is that COA will cover the entire township. So if Ian wants to fly it, we can certify him or one of his guys. If Keith needs to use it for zoning stuff, we can certify it, he can fly it.
We're not having
You see the drywall?
There's a colorful illustration, it wasn't meant to be taken literally. But that's basically, one of the benefits to it is that COA is a huge win. The other piece of this too is that I pay for another piece of software. That's an app that I actually have to go online before every flight and go, hey, I want to do this. And I can apply for waivers. And maybe they give them to me, maybe they don't, because I'm not allowed to fly at night, not supposed to fly over crowds. Not supposed to fly from a moving vehicle, not supposed to be outside the normal line of sight. But a COA erases all of those. It's an emergency. If I'm flying it, chances are it's public safety related, which means I should be able to do stuff. So when we flew up Brookside, I could fly, for that plane crash back in July 19th. I could get all the way to 161, but I couldn't go any further because of the airport. So I was able to fly over the golf course, which was fine. That's all we were really looking at. But if I wanted to fly, I couldn't because of that airspace. The COA will basically eliminate that. They unlock the drone. So I can fly it in the middle of OSU airport, right across it if I wanted. Of course, I don't want to do that, but that's kind of the benefit of that COA is it makes it much simpler, much easier, and we can self-certify. So unless anybody has any questions, this is the drone footage actually that we got from, and we used Dublin's drone for this, but from the Riverside Castle that burned up.
And that was really helpful because that driveway was completely locked up to
Yep.
John Petrosi at the time, and we could get up there to really get a good look.
So the software is $5,000 and.
$4,000 if we act now.
Wait.
$1,000 shipping and handling.
You get a second drone.
Well, what's nice about it too, and I think forget to mention this part, but if you buy that software package, if someday we upgrade our drones or we buy more of them, that same software package will work universally across all the platforms.
So that's kind of related to my question. I mean, what's the lifetime of that software? And does that include updates that they do to the
Yes.
software for the life?
Correct.
And it's $1,500 a year to maintain that software.
If you do it annually, yes, it's $1,500 a year. If you spend, well, right now it's $4,000. If we buy it when we get the drone, they're giving us a discount. That $4,000 is good forever.
So then you're not out.
You don't have to pay annually.
You don't have to pay the annual, and they're knocking off $1,000 from the.
Or $4,000 and you never have to pay.
You never have to pay,
That's
you
why
buy
it's
it for
the
life,
lifetime.
or you pay $1,500 per year.
Until it's outdated.
But in 10 years will be outdated.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's. where
Well,
I'm
the
like,
software,
what's
you're right, the drones probably will be much, and I've even made this joke before, but in my lifetime, the CPD helicopter things are gonna go away. Medflight's pretty safe because they're all people, but it would not be an unreasonable stretch to think every police department in the county, all 42 jurisdictions, can have a drone for a fraction of what one of those pilots makes in a year, let alone the, $8 million aircraft and the maintenance and the fuel and all the other stuff. These are just as capable, have just as much technology involved. If it falls out of the sky, you're out $5 or $6 grand. You're not planning funerals. So it is a huge step forward.
And there's insurance, and you get to replace it for $100.
That's right. So and that's another good question though too, is that, and I don't know if the township is actually doing self-insured for something like this, but if this, in the event that this did fall out of the sky and crack a windshield or hit somebody, that's something we need to think about too, is that how is that actually gonna get insured?
And that was one of my, I wrote a note down to check with our autonomer tomorrow to see if that's something that would be covered underneath our policy.
So, and I'm not gonna look over here because somebody's eyes will roll at me. So looking at the hours that were spent, I mean, the exception of training hours, which I understand, roughly half the hours were tied to neighborhood activities in one part of the town. So,
And along those lines, so what are we doing at 5K Family Fun, fourth parade, beggars? I mean, what activities are we doing with the drone?
So that was more like for the parade, it was all about traffic control, crowd management, and basically one of the shifts that we did this year for the 4th of July is instead of looking inward at the parade and trying to maintain distances and having us kind of worry about everybody, we shifted and went completely to looking outwards. The drone actually allowed us to pretty much watch the whole thing at that given time, so that the officers on the ground at each one of the checkpoints or at the intersections where they were controlling traffic, that's all they had to worry about.
and for Beggars Night,
Same concept. We basically just put it up, flew it around and made sure that there weren't any of the, creepy vans or,
so
those-
we only offer that service in one neighborhood.
No, we offered anywhere we want. I was asked.
That's where the creepy vans are.
Yeah.
And then so of the remaining half is mutual aid, and then half is our own emergent scenarios.
It's not gonna be used in Brookside, so.
I mean, well, we have to have a plane crash. So-
You did have.
No, all right, so.
That's what we need, a plane crash to have drone coverage.
So here's my take on technology. I love technology. I don't see, I think it can be utilized. But here's what I see technology. I had a client of mine that said, look, if you spend $60,000 a year on technology and you can replace one person, it's money well spent, because you don't have, and I keep saying, your number one cost is people. If we're gonna buy technology, we have to, so if this drone at the parade replaces an officer from having, that we have to pay overtime and things like that, that's what I'm gonna be looking at. I'm gonna be looking at, okay, we have a drone, we don't need to put, people all over the place, that we're saving man hours by engaging technology. To me, technology it's a nice to have, but it
Right.
has to be an ROI. And the ROI is that we're not spending money in another place.
Right.
So that's what I'm looking at, is technology is 100% replacing, helping us do our job, helping us not have to have more manpower. I get the traffic thing. I think it's awesome. I'm 100% on board with that type of stuff. What I'm not interested in is, that we're using it to film, township events for marketing purposes.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That if that's what we're doing, not interested. I mean, we got that ambulance, and, I know we got it for, $1 or whatever.
Right.
But we had all these grand plans for it, and it just never came to fruition, and we, so I think that's where my point is, and then on top of it is, I'm gonna go back. And I asked you the last meeting is, are you 100% going to own this under your budget? Because if Ian's gonna use it, which I can see 1,000 opportunities to use this for road and takeoffs and all, especially the measurement, the measurement and the being able to map like the terrain. I mean, I could see that going in 1,000 different directions, but as long as you own it and it's your budget, but understanding there's other departments that are gonna use it and it fits within your budget.
I mean, it's one of those things we can obviously have a discussion about as far as budget wise. The one thing I want to touch when you talk about the technology replacing somebody, it's not, for us, it wouldn't replace, it's enhance the safety side. But it is also be used in those events, but it also falls into us working with a traffic crash investigation unit we're trying to partner with Arlington to do.
Right.
It's combining resources. So there's a thing called a total station, which is a 360 camera that you use for crime scenes and mapping and traffic crash. Those are around $12,000 to $14,000. Arlington is willing to partner with us with the drone. We have the drone, they have the total station, so that plays into that side of it too.
Right.
So I guess in an essence, you could take maybe one less person in that group because you have the technology, but for my side, we're not looking to replace an individual. We're still gonna have the same amount of people at 4th of July and Beggars Night. This is gonna enhance our ability to oversee the.
Well, if anything,
you know,
we actually have somebody to operate the drone.
Well, you're
I
always,
mean, because if you're working like an intersection, that kind of thing, you're
But-
obviously not
but-
gonna be operating the drone and.
But Steve, the history is, you know, outside of the parade's been going on for 50-some years.
yes.
The Beggars Night has been going on for that. Have we had any issue that all of a sudden we have to amp up this technology?
I don't know that we've had any specific issues. We've had missing children that we have found. We've had those kind of things. But I think from a safety standpoint,
Right,
if you look at our monthly reports and our calls for service are completely different than they were 5 or 10 years ago.
right,
So I think from the safety aspect is where I look at it.
right.
Again, it's a bird's eye view. It is somebody that's able to sit in almost a command post type thing like 4th of July. They're able to see the bigger picture and say, we have a problem here, we have a problem there. 4th of July, when we used to do fireworks, we've had at least 2 or 3 years after fireworks where people were being aired that people were shooting each other.
Yeah.
Well, not the case, thank goodness, but we've had those calls because people were out in the streets doing whatever. So it's an enhanced safety feature for us on top of everything.
And I would argue that it is a force multiplier. So when I can fly this over a fatal crash and be done in 30 minutes, what normally would take me and 5 other dudes 4 hours to complete, I think there absolutely is a cost savings involved with that.
Right. No, I get it 100%, but you know, back to Michelle's point. Of the 35 hours, 22 of them were 3, 3, and 5 at, 5K family fun day and fourth parade. So we had 8, 9, 10, 11 hours in,
And then bigger.
Beggars Night. So, what I'm getting at is, yeah, it's great to have, and that you don't have to tell me on the crash thing. I think it saves a ton of money. What
Oh, yeah.
I look in those events is, can we save a person from having to have a report?
Oh, yes, in certain circumstances, that is absolute. I think if you have a situation like the 5K, instead of having 4 or 5 officers, you can do 3 with your drone.
Right.
So you can save a spot.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yes.
I'm getting at,
Absolutely.
that's where technology gets you,
Yes.
that you don't need that.
Yes.
I'm going to highlight that if we're offering services and only offering to one part of our community, then we're not doing our jobs.
What are you looking at me for?
Because
You can
I-
request, I never requested it. You have a family fun. Or parade.
Your face would not be turning red if I was not.
It's because my
I
$1.29
can-
Coke
I'll
just
give you
choked me
just a-
because now it's 30 cents more.
A very short
So,
example of why I'm a huge fan of this. I do a lot of litigation for trucking accidents. So we do some stuff for Roberts down, Wilmington area. They were involved in a bad accident, like in Benton County, which has probably the worst police officers. Not bad people, just poorly trained,
Oh, no.
poor resources.
This is recorded.
Take horrible pictures. No, it just doesn't, they just don't have the quality of officers and the quality of equipment. We were fortunate to be able to go out, we hired SEA, big engineering outfit that's on 270 there. The day after this accident, and they take the drone out, and I was fascinated, so I'm going out there, first thing in the morning. When the skid marks are fresh, the police already did their investigation. It's down to like the millimeter almost. If you do an actual measurement of skid marks, the image from the drone is exactly what the actual skid mark is, but it's taking it from all kinds of different angles. It could fly down the street and do the video of like, here's how the truck was seeing things around a curve. But the skid marks are there and where like, yaw marks are in the road and all the stuff that they do. for their reconstruction. It comes out perfectly. If we didn't have that. And, you know, the SEA guy that was showing this and he had the license and all that kind of stuff. When we finally got the Vinton County police report, it was awful. I mean, there was not a decent picture of skid marks. There was no perception. There was like no, it was just bad. The sketches were, you know, we had every blade of grass almost, you know, you could map it out. And it was perfect. And I'm sure this guy probably spent a fair amount of time with all these measurements. You don't need to do that. It's already measured for you. The diagram that took some time to do that was not very accurate. That was all perfectly done.
Yeah, I mean, from a crash standpoint or analysis, I mean.
Or the fire or the.
It is a no-brainer. I'm just, the only point I want to make is this. On those events that we gotta send more, I see this as it being, you know, to your point on 4th of July, we're, you know, traffic.
Right.
We don't have to have the number of officers stationed. It's like this drone could be flying around and being saying, hey, we got an issue where we're deploying, we're smart deploying instead of, you know, have to have people make.
Right.
So I'm, you know, I guess on the township, what I would tell social events and things like that. If we can use this to cut down hours, that's my only request in this thing, okay? Is that we're truly utilizing this to reduce man hours on those types of events.
Right.
Crash, I get it, it already, you know, it's technical, like Jim was saying, but on just some other stuff. So, I mean, I'm fine with it. I just want everybody doing it, because you know, you tend to have these great plans of like, you know, I want to use it and everything like that, and then it never comes to, you know, it never comes to fruition, and then we've just added more to our township budget. So that's what I'm just saying. I mean,
That completely understand that.
If God forbid, if you ever have anything in a school, that's everybody's big fear, it seems like, certainly, you know, mine.
Yeah.
Right,
I can't, that thing would be invaluable if there was some kind of a school issue.
yeah, and with the amount of accidents we have on 33 and just, you know, townships, like, I mean, I can't even imagine how much better that would be to, you know.
And that's one of the things, real quick to touch on, somehow this conversation started when we have that one donated and some of the benefits, and then to find out you can do a crash scene or a crime scene and so forth. And the sheriff's office is amazing at helping us do traffic crashes. You just talked about the one on 315. We've run a situation though where they're already on something. We had, I think, 3 fataled last year, and 2 of those, the sheriff's office took, but one of them, we couldn't get anybody because they were tied up. Dublin used to have 5 crash investigators, they're down to 1. And that's how the whole conversation started with us and Upper Arlington partnering, because they have a traffic reconstructions, but they don't have anybody else interested in doing traffic crash. Well, classes are free. You're just paying officers time to go train. So we have 3 officers that are willing to do the traffic crash and send one to be a reconstructionist. So I think that just makes sense for us as we progress forward to do these kind of
That
things.
thing Arlington has, it's a thing that goes on a tripod and spins.
Yes, that's exactly, it's called a.
See, so they do this thing, that's what SEA did with the truck and then the car. And then you can put that in, I mean, that truck's down to the, 1.2 from that's a completely different system.
Yes.
You can place that then to scale on the, it's mind blowing. It's almost like that, was it CGI, the computer
Yes.
generated images and stuff for films.
Yeah,
You can combine the 2 things and it's amazing.
well, I was, you know, like on the whole drainage issues that we were having, I mean, that thing would have been like from the light, and I think it's LiDAR, what it, you know, it's basically what it's tracking and everything like that. It's like, you know, if we can use that and we don't have to get a survey company out there, I mean, you know, it's gonna provide us information. So I would encourage the other departments, you know, zoning, things like that, that we can use it in other
I don't
areas.
pay you, I wants to pay for it all. I have no issue with it whatsoever.
I asked you, David, you sure you want this all on your budget?
I think he did ask you. I mean, this is yours, right? It's coming out of your
Yeah,
budget.
and again, it's.
Or you just charge the other departments every time they use it.
We can have a discussion.
Yeah, but what we had discussed is if, I mean, we're trying to do that more and more is share the cost. So if Ian were to need it, we could make I think a reasonable determination of how much would come out of his budget or what would come out of zoning's budget and stuff. And if the need is there, or when the need is there.
Yeah, I mean, reality is the lion's share is on us irregardless.
Right, so,
This is a mutual. Obviously, if somebody else requests this for some particular reason, whether it's a crash or whatever. Obviously, we have mutual aid back. I mean, we would offer this up. I mean, if somebody asks, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
just like Morrow County scenario we have here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So,
it depends on what the circumstances are for as far as how far we would travel.
okay,
You know, Dublin has a drone or two, same thing. If we need something, they can send one if they have someone available, but if we have one, we can return the favor because they're in a somewhat of a shortage of staffing and pilots. So they have maybe one pilot per shift. So if they're not available, they may call us, say, can you send a drone to this location? But as far as going to Morrow County, I think it would depend on the circumstances. Yeah.
and the last thing before the fiscal officer gives me a look again, I mean, let's be cognizant that there's more to the township than Worthington Village.
Oh, we spend plenty of time at that company.
That's great.
Now you're getting, at least you're getting the share of the
No,
load.
no, I can do it too.
Okay, does the board have any other questions?
So I do have one question, Carl. The price that I have here, this does not include the lifetime package. Okay, so the original price does not include the lifetime software, it includes the software for how long?
We have 3 months.
3 months.
Trial.
So we would have to make a decision after 3 months or do it all at once, so that price would change.
I don't care, we could wait 3 months to do that, see how we look at software and all that.
Can-
Well, then the 3 months, then it's gonna go up.
But does that mean it'll go up another 1,000 in 3 months?
Yeah. it
Okay,
would be-
so-
But we got 3
Oh, okay.
months, right? Yeah, 3 months for free. That's
Yeah. So
Okay,
then,
but are they gonna hold for, are they gonna hold
No.
for 4,000?
that's what he's saying, we either have to do it now or it's
That was
5,000.
kind of their sweeten the pot.
Yeah,
hey,
so
back
it's
now,
either
you get
by
this,
lifetime
you
now
say
or it goes
nine.
up 1,000.
Do it. Do it all.
So like a little bit.
So the total,
This one is.
Is it 4,000 even?
Yeah,
Yes.
4,000. So it's, the original was 7,590. So then it would be 11,500.
But that, oh, that didn't have any of the software costs. in it.
No,
I'm sorry, I thought it had the
yeah,
1,500.
I'll make the motion to approve, the original 7,590.07 for the drone with the additional 4,000 to purchase the, software package. That's a one-time cost for a total of 11,590.07.
second, vote,
Yes.
yes.
thank you.
Okay,
The second thing is, I think.
thank you, Carl.
Thank you, Carl, very much. The letter to the job, right? We had, with help from Beth and Mary, we put together a job offer letter for a part-time officer to replace one of our folks that retired last year. His name is Terrence Martin. His starting rate would be $19.34 an hour. And then after 1 year, he would move up to our current rate, which I think is 24. I apologize, I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but looking for motion to approve the hire of Terrence Marks part-time.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Vote, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That was all I had.
Okay, Madam Administrator,
Mine is really short. So we have, a meeting tomorrow that's being led by ODOT about the 161 Renworth. It's, gonna be going over the scope of work. So, we'll, choose their notes so that you can review everything after the traffic. Let's see. Oh, I thought it was tomorrow, man, it might be Wednesday.
Wednesday, it's Wednesday.
Is it Wednesday?
It's yours, yeah.
All right, so Friday, February 10th, there will be an 11:30 special meeting here at the Township Hall to discuss facilities. 22nd, we will be holding the meeting at Worthington Fire, which will also include a tour of their facility.
It's the Wednesday, right?
Right, President's Day is that Monday, so this would be on Wednesday. And also representatives from Plot Camera will be there to answer any questions you might have. And the 28th, we have the next Citizen Advisory Board meeting scheduled here at the township. And that's all I have.
It's close.
Request a motion to approve the creation of fund number 2914 for police body worn camera grant as listed 2023 VW LAC 3160.
Go ahead.
I'll make that motion.
Second. Yes.
Related, request approval to advance funds from the general fund in the amount of $40,000 to fund 2914 and approval to reimburse the general fund with the grant payment once received.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Vote.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Request a motion for approval of payroll and disbursements.
I'll make that motion.
Second, vote.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And, anything else for the good of the order? Motion to adjourn?
Make that motion.